My name is Ann Schell. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. And can everybody hear me? Because my voice doesn't carry real well. Okay. Is this working?
Ah, it is.
Okay. I might have to lean forward or get shorter. So as Dave mentioned, in sometime late in 2015, we got started on this study, and we did have a public information meeting last October. And I want to do a little bit of review to bring you up to that point, and then talk a little more about what we've done since. And we are to the point now where we have some alternatives that we're looking at and that we want your comments on. There are some yellow sheets over on the table over there, and we can pass some of those out, and we would like your comments on either very specific things that you see on the maps or just general philosophy things, or that's what we want to hear, and that'll go into what becomes the recommendations for the plan. So that's what we're here for tonight. I'll talk to you about what we've done, and we really want your input, okay? Okay, this is some of the stuff that was from the last meeting. The purpose of the study. The study will examine the feasibility of transit services within St. Croix County and between the county and frequented destinations in neighboring communities. Study will consider existing travel patterns and services in and around St. Croix County, review alternatives for types of service appropriate to identified transit needs, and make recommendations for funding and implementation of those services deemed most suitable. By engaging in the planning process, St. Croix County is laying the foundation for garnering funds and implementing a reasonable, efficient, and effective transit service, a service that will begin serving today's needs and adjust to changing needs in the future. This is just a little more background. When the subcommittee was formed, the grant that was received, and the contract that they made with West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, which is how I came into the deal. We looked at a lot of data. Planners love data. And this is just an example of some of the detailed things we looked at. This is from Census Data, and it's comparing households with no vehicles by town, village, city, and it starts over on the left with the United States and Wisconsin, and then the whole county, and then it breaks down into all the municipalities. And it's comparing it to the vehicles, the households that have fewer vehicles than they have workers. So say there's 3 people in a household who all have jobs, they're all working, and they have 1 car, or they have 2 cars. That's where they would show up. So the shorter bars in the front are the households with 0 vehicles, more than you might think. And the taller bars in the back are the ones, and it's percentage-wise of total households, are the ones that have fewer vehicles than they have workers. So you can see the kind of detail that we got down into and looked at just about every kind of data you can imagine having to do with transit and related to income and related to vehicles and all that sort of thing. This one shows persons age 65 and over as a % of the total population. And there's that one thing down the village of Springfield looks a little funny. That's because it's only the St. Croix County part of the village. And if I'm not mistaken, there's like a nursing home or something or in that area. So it comes out really high. That's a little anomaly. Then we also compared that to, the nation and the state and, how do we compare? And St. Croix County is actually fairly young, a little younger than typical. And we looked at all the services that are out there today and what they provide, who they provide it for, how many vehicles they have, what kinds of vehicles they have, where their funding comes from, you know, everything, school districts, nursing homes, public transit systems, everything that exists in the county. I think we did a pretty good job of getting most everything. A lot of them are very client-based, so they're not just open to everybody. It's a service that's provided by a company or a care facility or something like that, and it's only for their clients. Or sometimes it's only for a particular type of trip. There's nothing that's general except in the city of River Falls and the city of New Richmond, and they have shared ride taxi systems. More data on all of those. I don't expect you to be able to read that, but it's all their service hours. This is the kind of detail we went into. This map shows Metro Transit in the Twin Cities has a rideshare program that is online, and I talked to them, and they said yes, St. Croix County is included in the rideshare program, and these are the numbers of people by zip code, because that's the only way they could sort it, that are in their system. So they're engaged in the matching process for rides. Also, in looking at existing conditions, we looked at where the park and ride lots are. Dave mentioned park and ride lots. There are some, the ones that are just the red outline that aren't colored in, those are the ones that are proposed, that are not in place yet. The solid red ones are already in place. And we looked at where do people who live in St. Croix County, where do they work? And we looked at it in a lot of different ways. We looked at it town, village, city, you know, in every detail imaginable. This is kind of a generalization of it. The orange section of the pie up in the upper right-hand corner, they work, that's the percentage of the population of workers that work in the same community that they live in. It's kind of a small pie piece. It might have looked different 50 years ago. That would have been a bigger pie piece. The one then down, the kind of red one, those are people that worked, they live in St. Croix County and they work in St. Croix County, but not in the community they live in. So they travel someplace else in St. Croix County to work. The kind of gold wedge, those are the people who live in St. Croix County and they work in Wisconsin, but not in St. Croix County. So they're traveling to Pierce County or Dunn County or Polk County or someplace else in Wisconsin. And that great big piece, the big brown piece there, those are the people that work outside of they live in St. Croix County, work outside of the state of Wisconsin. So, of course, the vast majority of that is Minnesota. There might be a couple of them that fly to Tennessee for work, I don't know, but the vast majority of them are Minnesota. That's a big chunk. This is an example of the residence and workplace comparisons for every town, village, and city in the county. And these are, if you want to look at them in more detail, I think they're on that board over there. The three boards that are up over there are the early things that we did before the last public information meeting. And this is the new stuff over here. Okay, and from that we could look at, okay, what links are there? Where are there a lot of people that are traveling from one place to another place? We can look down the left side and see that people who live in the city of River Falls and work in the city of Hudson comes up to 685. So that's a pretty big number. And we can look at where the big numbers are. There's not that many people who live in Roberts that work in town of Baldwin. It's like 10. but it helps to look at the big numbers. When you're talking about transit, what kind of service you're looking at depends upon how many people there are making that trip. And it's all about people making a common trip. And this is kind of a summary of that again. It weeds it down into, it's sort of like that pie that we looked at. And it shows that 43% of people that are commuting to Minnesota. Now it says the survey is still open. That's a lie. It's closed. I got the rest of it taken off. I didn't take that off. But we did a survey. We had 934 responses, just under 1,000. I wanted to hit 1,000, but didn't quite make it. And we did a lot to determine if that was valid data that we got from that survey. We compared a lot of it to census data, and things came up pretty close, closer than I would have expected. And these are some of the basic things that came out of it. These are some of the things. 80% of the households have more than one vehicle available. 77%, their most frequent trip is to work. That's what we would expect. And 90% make that trip driving by themselves, all by themselves in their car. And those didn't surprise me too much. They are a little higher in St. Croix County than you would see in a lot of places, because there really aren't a lot of alternatives. But then it got interesting. 20% said, yes, I would use a convenient and economical transit service nearly every time for that trip if it were available. Now you can get into what we call convenient and economical, but that's a pretty big number. 15% said they would do that, 2 or more times a week. And 17% said occasionally. So over 76% would use transit service at least occasionally. But this is for other kinds of trips. So they have their most frequent trip, their work trip. And then we ask them, well, what about other trips that you make? 76% said at least occasionally they would use transit services for, going to the grocery store or for visiting a friend or whatever. And the top 5 reasons they gave for choosing to use transit would be to save money, save gas, improve the environment, use time more productively, avoid driving, biking, or walking in poor weather. And those are the top 5. These were our next steps. So this is kind of leading into where we are now. This is what we said we needed to do next. So right now we're on that 3rd bullet I'll talk to you about now, and that bullet right there. And we are holding our second open house tonight. And then we'll finalize recommendations and put the document together, and that will be out on the website for review. So you can all take a look at it when the whole draft is together. And we got a little more into the analysis. I'm going to go through these kind of quickly because I know this isn't the part you want to talk about. But this was from the survey, and we compared it, like I said, to census data. Then we got into a peer analysis, and we said, okay, what are other systems doing? So these orange outlined areas are other transit systems that we looked at around the state that they're all very different. You can't find anything that's exactly the same. They're all very different. But they're all set up to deal with the situation that they have. So we looked at pieces from all of these 7 different systems. Like this one here is a commuter system that by bus brings people from these distant areas to plants. That's what do they call it? Organic Valley. So there's some food production places that we're having difficulty getting employees to their plants, and they contribute towards the transit service, and that was set up for that, and it goes into La Crosse. So that's just a kind of a commuter bus service. Other ones are, let me see. Russ County does a shared ride taxi system countywide, and they run a bus within the city of Ladysmith. That's Russ County, right? Yeah. Namakagon Transit does something a little bit different in each of their 3 counties. It's kind of county by county. Some of their service centers around the casino and getting employees to the casino, but they also run some fixed routes out into the rural areas. And Dunn County has a fixed route service. Whoops. Dunn County has a fixed route service that's concentrated mainly on the students at the Stout campus. And then they have a bus that does door-to-door service throughout the city. So they all vary a little bit. We did some comparisons, and you can see they're all really different, whether you look at how many passengers they're carrying, the population they're serving, their expenses, their revenues, they're all over the place. The first column, this one here, Tier C, that's a group of transit systems that are kind of rural transit systems, and that's a category that the state uses for funding. So it's all those all of these services fit under that Tier C. And this is the total for the entire Tier C. These are some operating data that we look at, comparing all those different systems. And you can see like Dunn County Transit is the red column in each one. They have a pretty good operating ratio. That means their revenue compared to their expenses is pretty good. Actually, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But their revenue per hour, because of the kind of service that they provide, is good. So it's kind of good in some ways, bad in some other ways. They're serving a very small area, so that's what makes it different. But they're carrying a lot of people in that very small area. We looked at all that kind of data. This is boring stuff, I know. Now we'll get into the fun stuff. From all that information, I looked at the situation in St. Croix County and looked at where the big movements are and put together some potential. This is first fixed route services. Now, fixed route services are a bus or a small bus or a van, depending upon how many passengers there are going to be, that runs on a schedule. And typically you go to a stop to pick it up. It's not going to necessarily come to your door. It's not going to take you to the door of where you're working unless that happens to be on the route. But I looked at areas that would serve a lot of places of employment, where there are a lot of students, low-income people, and just a lot of trips. That was the biggest thing. There are a lot of trips that are covered by these routes. I can't remember if I put them on individually. I don't think I did. So route number 1 that we're looking at here is between Hudson and River Falls. And that route has a lot of commuters. There's a lot of destinations along the route, both on the River Falls end and on the Hudson end. and quite a few propping up in between. One of the big generators is the university in River Falls, but there are also a lot of people who live in River Falls and work in Hudson. Number 2 is this green, lighter green one up here, and that's between New Richmond and Hudson. Goes through Somerset and through North Hudson, connects up with what will be, this is the new bridge crossing site, and what will be a park and ride lot near the bridge. And the third route I looked at is between New Richmond and River Falls, goes through Roberts. Park and ride lot here, park and ride lot here down in River Falls. We have Indian Head Technical College in New Richmond, UW River Falls in River Falls, as well as Chippewa Valley Technical College campus in River Falls. The fourth one I have on here is a little bit different, and that this would likely be run, it could go a number of different ways, but it would likely be something that would be run by Metro Transit. So it would take a lot of coordination with them, whether the county decides that's something they want to run or Metro Transit thinks they might want to run it. It's going to require a lot of coordination between the two. And that's where we're looking at hitting a lot of park and ride lots and getting some of those people across the bridge and to their jobs without having to drive their own car. Now we did some cost projections. This is a little tricky to do. You have to do a lot of assumptions. I did some pretty conservative ones that we had examples for are pretty well founded, like $50 an hour is a pretty well founded estimate for a cost per hour. I worked out the number of round trips there would be, service hours per week, service hours per year, and came up with a cost for each one of those first 3 routes. So this is what a total cost, and then I'll explain how this breaks down. This is fare box revenue. Now this is, all I can say is it's a very conservative projection. And it's based on 10% of the costs. And I figured out that actually comes to less than 2 riders an hour. So it'll be higher than that. This is an extremely conservative number. But if we use that, then state and federal funding, which comes through Wisconsin DOT, right now they're covering 55% of what they call the operating deficit, which is the difference between the cost and the fare box revenues. So those 2 federal and state sources together right now are covering about 55% of what's left. And the rest of that becomes what's called local match. That can be from taxes, it can be from businesses that see that they're benefiting from the service, like the ones in La Crosse. It can be from a lot of other sources, other grants, So with that extremely conservative projection, those are the kinds of costs that we're looking at for those 3 routes. And it's also assuming an average fare of $3. You'd probably have a structured fare, different fares for elderly and disabled riders, or a full adult fare might be different. You might have passes that give a discount, but it's based on an average fare of $3. Totally different kind of service that we also looked at that could be countywide. Now this is where different kinds of transit apply to different kinds of situations. Fixed route transit, if you're going to be running a bus, you want that to be a fairly steady ridership. You want to know there's enough people there that it justifies doing that. A lot of the county, you don't have that. It's much more rural. Trips from one place to another are, the destinations are more spread out, and there's just fewer people doing it. So shared ride taxi alternative could be countywide. You'd probably want to coordinate it with the services in New Richmond and River Falls and the route structure if it lays on top of the route structure. You don't want a lot of different services doing the same thing. So what I'm showing here is the county broken up into zones. That's primarily for a fare structure. And the little box that you see down here is an example. Ozaukee County has a shared ride system, and they cut their county up into zones like this. So depending upon how many zones you go through on your trip, the more zones, the more expensive your fare is. So it's basically, you travel farther, you pay more. And this, a shared ride taxi system, is a curb to curb. They'll pick you up in front of your house, take you to where you want to go, drop you off at the curb. It's pricey. This is assuming that there are 10 counties, or I'm sorry, 10 vehicles running countywide for that same 70 hours a week. So that's the same as the buses we were talking about. It's like 12 hours on Monday through Friday and 10 hours on Saturday. And costs per hour range all over the place. I kind of stabbed in the middle. $25 an hour seems fairly reasonable, and worked out an estimated cost. Now the revenue projected assumes 1.25 riders per vehicle hour. And with the long distances that could be there, that's reasonable. Be great if it was higher. And an average fare of $4. So that's what the revenue is based on. And then we do the same thing, federal and state share and the projected local share. If it was 20 vehicles out there, you'd have quicker service, but it would cost twice as much. So there's a lot of variables there. That's what that's for. There's some other service alternatives, which we talk about a little bit on the signs. There's volunteer driver program, some of which exists in the county now for elderly and disabled passengers. They typically kind of fill the holes for times when there aren't other services, or for people who aren't eligible for other services, things like that. They kind of fill the holes. We talked a little bit about the rideshare program, van pool program. They exist through Metro Transit. They could be promoted more. I think there's probably a lot of people that don't know they're there or know how they work. And intercity passenger rail. This one always gets people excited. There is a group, West Central Wisconsin Rail Coalition, and they've been centered in Eau Claire, but we do have members from this way, and if anybody's interested in becoming a member, I can give you a brochure, brought a few along. And the coalition has been together for about 20 years, almost 20 years. In the last few years, they've kind of changed their tact a little bit, and they're going gangbusters. And they are working on getting transit service between Eau Claire and the Twin Cities. And they think they can have it in place within 5 years. And they're trying to do it privately. And they put together an organizing committee that's made up of business people from Eau Claire, and we're getting some more out this way. And they've been reviewing the business plans, and they're talking with Union Pacific Railroad and finding out what kind of capital needs there are and all that sort of thing. And they're moving. So don't laugh when somebody says when the train comes through, because it just might. So that's another thing that we consider in this, that could happen as well. And that's the part of it that we're talking about. So that's me. And we'll open it up for questions. And I would also like to give you some time to look at the boards, and I'll be around to ask questions if you're looking at the boards. We do have the yellow sheets for comments. Please, please, please give us your comments. Questions? Yes. Is there a hand up?
He has written something he wanted to. So I'll read this for you, Ramsey, okay? Okay. Dear County Board members, other representatives. Oh, okay, sorry. And it's my right. So this is Ramsey Lee, this gentleman that was just asking the question. He's written out a thing to ask us to read. Dear County Board members, other representatives, and distinguished guests, thank you so much for hosting this meeting tonight. As you know, St. Croix County, particularly the Hudson area, is very limited on accessible and affordable transportation. We are thankful for what we have, but currently transportation is limited to weekends only and subsidized 2 hours, 2 days a week. Furthermore, the taxi service, which St. Croix County has a contract with, is not wheelchair accessible, and this prohibits some residents from having access and participating in full community lives. Several residences I know want to join the workforce, but in order to do this, we have to come up with an accessible and affordable transportation system. When I went to the UW Wisconsin Whitewater, they had brown cab service, a taxi service that was approximately $5 per ride. And if River Falls can have rideshare and New Richmond can have rideshare, can we somehow have something similar in Hudson? I'm grateful to have my friends here today, and thank you to the ADRC for all the hard work that they do. We're extremely grateful for a survey that St. Croix County did assessing the feasibility of the transportation system. Thanks again for hosting this meeting. I hope in the future the disability community is notified first, that we can have even more people here. Luckily, I found out about through a listening session with Sheila Harsdorf, and thank you to all who attended it, and thank you to the Transportation Subcommittee for all their hard work. The community stands behind you 100%, and God bless what you do. And the disability community would love to be further involved in the process. Let us know what we can do to help. I look forward to getting involved in promoting accessible transportation, not only throughout the St. Croix County area, but statewide for all citizens. Ensuring affordable access to accessible transportation is a crucial element for a long-term success of citizens with disabilities and the general public. People of all abilities need to be able to participate in all aspects of community life. In order to accomplish this, transportation must be accessible and affordable to everyone so that people of all abilities can continue to participate in employment and other activities. As the population continues to grow, there is always need for accessible, affordable transportation. Many individuals of all abilities have increasingly rely on family members and friends to take off work and get to places they need to be. This puts a hardship on caregivers. With an accessible, affordable transportation program, citizens could be more independent by calling for their own rides to and from work and be contributors to society. As of right now, the senior citizens have a transportation program that operates 1 or 2 days a week. I'm hoping that with St. Croix County's community transportation program, some partnerships can be made to develop transportation options. People can get to appointments, movies, or simply go to work. We're very grateful to the services we have in the City of Hudson. The taxi service for accessible, affordable transportation is only available limited hours, making it hard for people to get to their jobs. In my opinion, people with disabilities must be able to participate in all aspects of civic life. In order to make this happen, we must ensure that individuals have the same access to transportation as the general public. This will allow persons with disabilities to become contributors to society and pursue their employment goals and aspects of civic life and other essential parts of the American dream. Please note I'm speaking as a citizen, not a part of any organization. Your consideration in this matter is greatly appreciated. He has a phone number here, and I'll leave this back at the table. Sincerely, Ramsey Lee, Hudson, Wisconsin. And I thank you, Ramsey. It was very well written. So.